Whether we realize it or not, all of us are looking for a leader or follow. We spend different seasons going from teachers to family members to movie stars and athletes, looking for the perfect role model for our life. Each and every time, we find that the people we have chosen to put our hope in let us down. What if this didn't have to be the case? What if there's a perfect leader that we all have the chance to follow? As we read the Bible over and over again, we find Jesus' simple, radical call. Come, follow me. What does it mean to follow the leader? Let's find out together.
Hey, thanks so much for being here this weekend. My name's Ryan, campus pastor here at our Ellet campus, and excited to be with you this weekend. If we haven't met yet, I'd love to meet you at some point. Maybe let us know that you're here and maybe how you found this conversation and how you connected to it. But I want to let you know, if you didn't know, that we have begun gathering in person. So we have live services every weekend at 9 o'clock at Crossview Church, and that has been happening for the last 3 weeks now. This is our fourth weekend, and so if you would like to come and attend live in person, if you feel safe to do that and healthy to do that, we would love to have you here. And if not, we're going to continue to meet online each and every week, and so make sure to find us here. I want to tell you about a couple things that are happening here in the life of our campus. Some big things are happening right now as we are in conversations with Crossview Church, where we're currently renting from them. And we're in discussions about becoming one, about Crossview becoming a part of Grace Church. And so we started to have conversations this last week, and we're going to have another discussion with that group this coming Wednesday night. And simultaneously, at the same time, on the 16th, we're going to be gathering together. Grace Church will gather together to pray for the people of Crossview and for us as we have that conversation. And so if you want to gather to pray with us, or if you just want to pray at home, I encourage you to do that. That's this Wednesday night at 7 o'clock at our offices. And feel free to gather. Let us know that you're interested in doing that. Kind of RSVP that way. And we would love to see you there. So excited about where God is leading and how He's working. And it's an exciting time to be a part of kind of what God's doing here. But I want to walk into our next conversation in our series, Follow the Leader. And we've been looking at this kind of concept of leadership here for the last handful of weeks. And we said that leadership is really important to us, although we have a complicated relationship with it. We said we're drawn to it and we're kind of repelled from it. And as all of us kind of look for a leader to follow, as it's kind of built into who we are, that we're kind of built to lead and we're built to follow. We said it's instinctual, and we even saw that in the first human beings that were on the planet. That leadership is going to be a key piece and an important piece of our lives here on the planet. And so what we've been doing is taking a hard look at that, because we said we know that we all have kind of been drawn to leaders, maybe been influenced by some in positive ways. Also, we've kind of been drawn to leaders and maybe been hurt or disillusioned as we saw kind of their humanity in their imperfectness. Just like all of us, right? No one is perfect except for Jesus. And so as we follow human leaders, we're bound to be disappointed. Of course, certainly we want to support human leaders that are worth following, but no one is worth the placement of our hope except for Jesus. And so we said that's what we want to do in this series of conversations, is really look at the person of Christ, kind of pull Him out of the religion box or the religion category, and look at Him as our leader that we're going to follow, right? And just like we would mimic maybe someone else's attitude or their life or their lifestyle, we want to look at the person of Christ and say, boy, I want to follow Him as a leader, because by any measurement, Jesus would have unbelievable qualifications as a person of influence and as a leader. 2,000 years later, He is more influential today than He was then. It's incredible. He has billions of people that call on His name and gather in His name, voluntarily give of their time, their talent, their treasure to worship and follow Him, and to listen to His words and kind of be changed by His life. The Bible, of course, best-selling book of all time, the calendar structured around His life when we think that He was born. All right, that's why it's 2020 Day, because somebody said, hey, Jesus was born around here. Let's build time around that. And so enormous influence, even down to how we think about right and wrong. Often the words of Jesus are going to surround our thoughts, opinions, and worldviews surrounding kind of what we think of as a moral thing or not. So that's what we've been looking at. And over the last handful of weeks, we said we just want to kind of examine the person of Christ. We want to look at him as a leader and understand some of his character and understand some kind of his personality. And so we looked at Jesus and kind of looked at the fact that he said that he is the light of the world, that he's trustworthy, there's no darkness in him. We took some time last week to talk about servant leadership and the fact that Jesus came not to be served, but to be a servant and to give his life as a ransom for many. And what we want to do today is look at another side of Jesus, and it's kind of an incredible quality that Jesus is going to show to us and live out. And it's going to be Jesus's kind of his gentle side. And I don't mean Jesus was like a softie or a teddy bear. He's not a doormat, nothing like that. Jesus had a strength and a power that was under control. Sometimes we call that meekness, right? Not a super popular word in our culture, but he's got a gentleness in his leadership where he's going to invite people of all kinds into his sphere, and he's going to invite them to come to him. Right? So the same leader that says, "Follow me," also looks at the people that surround him, and he says, "Don't just follow me, come to me. I want to invite you to be with me, and I want us to know each other." And we're going to unpack some of that here today. So as we dial into it, really this first verse we're going to take a look at kind of sets the stage for the rest of our conversation. So I want us to tune into this. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. And here's what Jesus is going to say. He's going to say, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." He says, "and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and I am humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." He says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So here's the idea. He uses this invitation. He says, hey, come to me, right? Are you weary? Are you burdened? I'm going to invite you to come to me, and I'm going to give you rest, right? It's kind of a promise that he's making. I will give a rest to you that is not available anywhere else. And then he used this terminology of a yoke, right? He says, take my yoke upon you, learn from me. And he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And this is a phrase, or kind of a term from the ancient days where in farming, cattle would have a yoke on them, right? And they would kind of walk in sets of two. They'd walk in pairs or even sometimes more than that. And as they put that yoke on that, they could pull a plow with this yoke. And oftentimes in the ancient world, that would be a familiar idea, that this yoke would be on someone, and that's kind of how they would move forward. And teachers would talk about their teaching as a yoke, right? This is the kind of teaching that you're going to walk in and move in. And the idea here is Jesus is saying, take my yoke, take my teaching upon you, and learn from me. And he's going to say, my teaching, my yoke, it's easy, and my burden is light. And what he means by that is when we embrace the invitation to come to Jesus, or when we're kind of willing to do that, what happens when we surrender, kind of fighting against finding rest in Christ, man, it's kind of simple. It's kind of easy to do it once we make that step. Making the step isn't always super easy, right? Surrendering ourselves to Christ and coming under his teaching, under his yoke, is not an easy decision. But man, once I'm there, things are simpler. Things are somewhat easier as far as that they lack complexity. The burden of it is lighter because I'm not fighting for my own agenda. I'm not always bucking the system, bucking what Jesus is trying to do in my life. The yoke is easy, the burden is light. So I want to talk about this, and I want us to see Jesus as this gentle leader, as he interacts with three different groups of people that we're going to look at today. Of course, this isn't comprehensive. It's not every group of people that you can think of, but it's going to cover a lot of ground. And I think we're going to see ourselves in these three groups. And this is important, just like whenever we're coming to the Bible, when we look at stories in the Bible, part of what God's trying to do when he tells us a story in the Bible is he wants us to see ourselves in it. Right? He's not writing this so we think about other people. And so as we're looking at these different groups of people, we shouldn't think, oh man, that person totally needs to hear this message, that they could really use that. We're supposed to see ourselves in it. And we're supposed to kind of apply what God is saying and meet Jesus in the midst of that story, because we see ourselves kind of in the other people that are being described. So here's the first group that we're going to talk about, and we're going to look at. We're going to kind of see this open up to us. So here's the first one. He's going to say this: his invitation is open to us, the outcasts. Right, the outcasts. His invitation is open to us, the outcasts. Let me show you some of where this is going to come from. So Jesus, while he's on the planet, while he's teaching, he's going to quote this in Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners," or the captives, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. So he's quoting this from the book of Isaiah, and this is part of what the Messiah, this promised leader, was supposed to do, is he was to bring help to the poor, the oppressed, the outcast. Right? You see it here: the poor, the blind, the prisoners, the oppressed, these people that are kind of pressed to the edges of society. They're marginalized people, the outcasts. And in this day and time, the marginalized in the Jewish culture, the people who were pressed to the side, would be people that were diseased, people who were lepers. Sometimes women would be marginalized. Sometimes children would be marginalized. Sometimes people who were not Jewish, who they called Gentiles, in their culture would be marginalized. Certainly the poor sometimes would be pressed to the kind of pushed away. And people who are out here on the fringes, who weren't in kind of the center of the culture and the society, would feel kind of on the outside, on the outskirts of the norm. And Jesus says to them, hey, come to me, you who are burdened, who are weary. I want you to come to me. You're going to find rest for your souls. And we need to see ourselves in that category, because I'm pretty sure all of us at one time or another have felt like we were on the outside of the norm, at least at some point. I remember feeling this way. I switched schools. When I was in middle school, we moved, and I was switching schools in 7th grade, and it was like October. So 7th grade had already started, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to go in 7th grade, which is middle school, which is the weirdest time, I'm convinced, of life ever. We are strange creatures in 7th grade. I certainly was. And we feel awkward and abnormal, and we've got limbs that are a little bit too long, and we're not sure how to use them, kind of gangly and weird and super insecure, right? And I would fall completely into that category in 7th grade. And so mid-7th grade, right, like kind of midway through the semester, I switched school systems and had to go enter into a new school system after it already started. So I remember going to this new school, and I remember being just absolutely terrified to go from people that I know, and I kind of had my safe little enclave of friends to hide in back in my old school, and now I'm going to go to this new school, and I know absolutely nobody. And so I was terrified by that, and I remember walking in, and I felt like an outcast. I felt like I was the new kid, right? I'm like the guy that nobody knows, and now I'm exposed, and everybody sees me, and they're not sure, right, who I am, and I don't know who to talk to and who to kind of be an ally with or not. And I remember all of that, and I even remember feeling a little bit nervous to make friends. I felt a little nervous to allow kind of that new group of people that were trying to be kind to me to be kind to me. And part of that is, if you've ever been on the outside, if you've ever been an outcast, if you've ever been pressed to the sides, you know that you get kind of beat down in life, and as that happens, you become hardened a little bit. You become kind of like a cornered animal, a beat animal, and you're kind of slow to trust people. And that's kind of how I felt as I went into this new school system. I'll never forget this. I remember being at a lunch table, and these new kids came up to me, and they tried to befriend me. And I remember thinking to myself, should I trust these people or not? Are they just going to make friends with me, pretend to make friends with me, then they're going to go and talk about me behind my back with their friend group? They don't really want to accept me. They're just trying to mock me. And in retrospect, what's funny is later, as I did make friends with these people, kind of years later, we talked about that interaction. And they said, man, we were so surprised that you kind of rejected us, that you pushed us off. And what's fascinating is that's what happens with outcasts. When we're on the marginalized fringes of society, we become hard to love. We become difficult to love. I was difficult to love because I could not trust, and I didn't know if I should lock into that invitation or not. And when Jesus approaches these people here in the first century, and when Jesus approaches us, his leadership, as he's gentle to us and with us and says, hey, come to me. You're going to find rest for your souls. There's a certain strength in that gentleness because he knows that he's not going to always be trusted. Sometimes he's going to get kicked against. Sometimes he's going to get fought against, right? But by the caged animal in the corner, he's going to get bit, so to say. And the outcast that is in our day and our age, and certainly it's us, that person is who Jesus is seeking after. He's going to break through the social norms of the day and crush all those and say, I see you. You feel marginalized. You feel like you're not good enough. You feel like you're not smart enough, not pretty enough, not athletic enough, not financially secure enough, not advanced enough in your life. Whatever it is, Jesus would look at you and say, none of that matters. I'm looking to you. I want you to come to me, and you're going to find rest for your souls. Lay all that burden down, right? The burden of thinking that you're not good enough, the burden of thinking that you're not smart, right? Whatever it is, whatever you're not enough of, lay that down. I want to connect with you who live kind of as an outcast in the midst of whatever situation you find yourself in. That's fascinating because people didn't do this in this day and age, right? People didn't lead this way. They didn't go and run towards the person that didn't add any perceived value to their mission. And if they didn't have something to offer them in return, why would that leader love them? Well, this is who Jesus is. Jesus sees the built-in value in each person, regardless of where they sit in society. And so he's doing that same thing today, offering that same invitation to us outcasts today, right? To the new kids and to those who feel a little insecure and a little lost and a little defensive and a little untrusting. He looks at you and me and says, come to me. You're going to find rest for your souls. Right? So here's kind of the first group that we're going to look at. Right? His invitation's open to us, the outcast. Now, he's got other groups that he's also making this invitation to. His invitation is open to us, the failures. The failures. When we're talking about the failures, we're talking about moral failure. Those who have been kind of deeply imperfect in our culture. When Jesus was in ministry and on the planet here in Matthew 9, here's some interesting things that he did. Matthew tells us while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came, and they ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with the tax collectors and sinners? Right? Jesus chose to eat with the tax collectors and sinners. And in this culture, when you ate with someone, it was a big statement. Eating in the Middle Eastern world, if you've ever been to the Middle East, it's still kind of a big thing. I married somebody who's Lebanese, Middle Eastern lady, and so I feel this in culture even today. But when you share a meal with someone, it's really a statement of acceptance that we are family together. We want to share this shared experience together, and it's really a statement of approval in many ways in the culture. And so the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, were asking Jesus, hey, asking the disciples, why is your teacher, why is Jesus kind of showing this approval and accepting these people who don't seem to merit acceptance? They're the tax collectors. These are the people that take advantage of us for the Roman government. That's what they would have thought. The people who are sinners, the people who were clearly a moral failure in their day and age. Jesus looks at the tax collectors and the sinners, and he says, come to me, right? You're going to find rest for your souls. And he offers their invitation to them. Now, he goes on, he says, on hearing this, Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. The statement's loaded. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus says, hey, teachers of the law, Pharisees, people who kind of were self-righteous in their view of themselves, he says, listen, I'm not looking for sacrifice from you. I'm not looking for you to go produce a bunch of good things that you think I want. What I want you to do is have a mercy about you. I want you to see the people that have been moral failures in your life and see them with mercy because you have been shown mercy. Right? You're offered mercy, so you should offer that same mercy to the people around you. Right? And we're talking about the failures that Jesus is offering himself to when he's opening this invitation to us. Really, any sane, rational person has to recognize that we all land in this category of the failures. I don't know anybody who is morally perfect. If you are, that would be a great surprise to me because I certainly am not. In fact, I know at a very deep, deep level that I have broken God's law and broken God's heart more times than I'd like to admit. In fact, about half of my life was spent really pursuing pride and lust as a non-Christian person, as an atheistic person. I live life completely without God. And then, frankly, even my life as a Christ follower, I fail Jesus regularly when I'm trying to pursue him and do that in deeply imperfect levels. So we're all failures. We would all look at our lives, our moral lives, and we would all be able to say, I want to do good sometimes, but I don't do it perfectly, and I break God's law. So I'm a person who is a sinner. I want to see myself around that table with Jesus. I'm the tax collector. I'm the sinner. Right? That's you and me. We are people who have broken the laws and the commandments of God, and it's to us that Jesus would look and say, hey, I want you to come to me. You're going to find rest for your souls. And by the way, he's making that same offer to all kinds of other people who fall into the failures category. Right? This is why he's going to show mercy. Mercy to the person who blew up their life. Mercy to the person who's in addiction. Mercy to the person who we might look at and think, oh, I'm glad I'm not that person. And he shows mercy to you. And he shows mercy to me. Right? And as I look back sometimes on my old life as a person that wasn't a follower of Jesus, sometimes I can forget where I came from. And sometimes I even forget that I failed today. And that's when I find myself in self-righteousness. And I start to think, oh man, I've got this thing figured out. And I'm not a failure. Those other people are failures, but I'm not. And I have to remember, oh God, protect me. Thank you for your mercy. I need it today as much as I needed it 20 years ago when I said yes to you as my Savior for the first time. He's looking at the people who have regrets and the people who have blown things up in their lives and the people who've made devastating decisions or just have had impure motives. And he would say, listen, I want you to come to me. I'm going to give you rest. Why? He's a gentle leader. His invitation is out there to find rest in my failure. It's open to the outcast. It's open to the failure. And then his actual invitation also extends a little bit further. Here's the next one. His invitation is open to the strong. His invitation is open to the strong. Now let me talk about what that looks like a little bit here as we look at this verse. John chapter 3 says this, and we'll unpack it a little bit. He says, now there was a Pharisee, a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night, and he said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. Nicodemus would have been a high-end, upstanding member of this Jewish ruling council. He's a Pharisee, right? So he was a religious leader of the time. And what he does is he comes to Jesus at night in secret. And he shows up to Jesus, and he's like, I'm going to ask Jesus some questions. I'm going to start to pursue Jesus. Nicodemus would have been one of the strong. He would have been one of those people that looked put together, looked like he had it together, certainly seemed like he had it together, and he even did. But anybody who's kind of lived in the strong category knows that the cracks start to show, right? And as we are bearing our own weight, as we're keeping it together, as we're trying to manage our own life, as we're trying to be strong, there's some doubts, there's some questions that start to erupt within us. This certainly happened with Nicodemus. He's the teacher of the law. Later in this story, Jesus would look back at him and say, Nicodemus, you're the teacher of Israel. You're kind of a big deal. Don't you know these things that you're seeking to find from me? What he was doing is he was testing Nicodemus. Nicodemus had enormous authority and enormous responsibility in Israel, and he knows that he's missing something. He knows something's not quite right. There's some questions that he doesn't quite have answered. There's some pieces that don't quite fit together. And so that need of not being able to hold it all together, not being able to find all the answers to our questions, ultimately is going to be what drives us back to Jesus. And the gentle leader, his invitation is open to us. To that person, to me and to you, the strong. And ultimately, man, when I came to know Jesus, I would put myself kind of in the strong category. I felt like I had life by the tail. I had a good job. I was healthy. I was in good shape. I was in college. I had friends, right? I had things that I thought I wanted, but inside, on the inside, as I held it all together, I had some deep questions that I did not have answers for. And as those cracks started to show in me, I started looking for answers. And I needed to find a way to have my questions answered and my problems solved. And I couldn't hold it all together anymore. The strong, right? As I walked in that kind of category, I was starting to break down and to crack, and I needed somebody else to be my leader. And I needed to find my way through it. And that has been true of various people in the Bible. Kind of the Apostle Paul was like that, and Nicodemus, certainly, who we're looking at here today. And that's going to be true of a bunch of us. All right, there are some of us who are the strong. And maybe we would say, yeah, I pay my bills, and I'm a good citizen, and I vote, and I don't think of people like that. I've got it together. I'm good. Right? I mean, we may not even say it that way, but we kind of think that way. But in the quiet moments of the day or in the quiet moments of the evening, and the questions erupt and the cracks start to show, and we wonder, can I hold it together any longer? Can I keep bearing this burden? Can I bear this yoke any longer? And I just want us to know that Jesus, in those quiet moments, would kind of whisper to us and say to us, hey, come to me. I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, right? My burden is light. My yoke is easy. You're going to find rest for your souls. That's going to be true for the strong. It's going to be true for the failure. It's going to be true, right? It's going to be true for the outcast. It's true for all of us. And at least for me, I see myself in all three of those categories, and there's probably more. But this invitation's out there for all of us. You don't have to be a certain kind of person to be invited by Jesus into his rest. He's gentle. He loves us. He sees past the exterior, the facade that we put up. He sees past our weaknesses. He even sees past our sin. And what he ultimately looks at us and says is, hey, listen, you will find rest for your souls. Guys, I want us to hear this. This is a promise. You will find rest for your souls. Because this is a big conversation. It's a big deal. For me personally, this year, one of my biggest goals, really my biggest goal period personally, is to try to walk in this rest and to come to Jesus more and more and more often. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling burdened, when I'm feeling like it's more than I can handle, when I'm feeling self-righteous, when I'm feeling alone, I want to come back over and over, and I want to know and remember that Jesus promised me that I would find rest for my souls, right? For my soul. That's for each of us. And I would say, for me, I think this is going to take a long time. Because at least personally, that outcast is pretty slow to trust still. Right? And that failure is sometimes still, I'm a little slow to admit it, that I messed it up. And the strong, and I like feeling strong. I like feeling like I have it all together. Sometimes it's hard for me to admit that I'm actually weak on the inside and I need help. I need somebody else to give me rest. I need somebody else's yoke upon me. But this is, I think, where we need to land. I think we look at the leader, we look at Jesus, and we hear him say, right, follow him. I want to come to him and I want to lay down my burden. Right? I want to lay down my burden. So what do we do with this today? It's a good question. As we look at the gentle leader and we hear his invitation to come to him, I think we want to take some space and recognize what is the burden that I'm carrying right now that Jesus would just invite me to lay down. Right? And this isn't for somebody else. This is for you and for me. What anxiety, what pressure, what fear, what relationship, what goal is it that if Jesus were here in the room with you, he would look at you and say, come on, come to me, lay that thing down, lay that burden down, and I want you just to find rest. I want your soul to be at rest. I don't know about you, but I want to live in that rest. I don't want to be the guy that carries the burden and tries to pretend I have it. I want to live life with Jesus, with his yoke, with his rest. I believe that it is light. I believe that it is easy in the sense that his ways are way better than mine. And I'm just going to live in frustration if I try to do it my own way. So can we land there? Maybe that's for the first time for you. Maybe you're investigating a relationship with Jesus and you've been carrying a burden your whole life. And I just want you to know that Jesus will take all of it. He'll forgive all of your sin. He'll never leave you or forsake you. He's always available. He never gets too busy. He's an amazing and a gentle and a perfect leader. And if you want to follow him, his invitation is there. Receive the forgiveness of your sins. You can come to him, and you're going to find rest for your soul. Accept the forgiveness of your sin by his perfection. As for the rest of us, we just want to give some room to say, Lord, help me see what my burden is. Help me have the courage to trust you, to lay it down, and to come to you, and to live in the rest that you died to give me. As we do that, would you take some time, a little bit of space, and allow Jesus to speak to your heart and your mind today? Would you pray with me? Father, we want to say thank you. Lord, thanks for sending Jesus. Thanks that he's the perfect leader, that he sees past the social barriers that we divide each other by. And he sees me as the outcast. When I am the one on the fringe, he doesn't see that. He looks at me and he loves me. Even when other people have rejected me, I'm still loved by you. And Lord, you see all my sin. You know all about it. And yet you still offer an invitation to forgive it and to give me rest in the middle of it. And God, you see it when I look and I act strong. And God, thank you that you're always available for me to come to you, to humble myself and approach you with boldness and with confidence. And you'll forgive me, you'll love me, you give me rest, and you'll live life with me. God, that's true for all of us. No matter where we've been or what we've done, the invitation stands. Thank you for your gentle nature. Lord, you're a good shepherd, and we just say thank you today for loving us. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.